Trump tariffs inflict heavy pain on crypto and financial markets. What happens next? We cover all this right now in the Collective Shift weekly recap, actionable insights, and a breakdown into the crypto market, all in under 30 minutes. A week for the history books, I think, Simon. Happy to break it down.
It certainly has been. I think we've had a few weeks where we've been saying not a lot has been happening, but we did talk about Liberation Day, and we either said it's going to be a nothing burger or it's going to be bad. Well, it certainly wasn't a nothing burger. It was definitely something big. I guess I didn't think the markets would react as badly as they have because I think people knew this was coming. But, Trump just shocked everyone with, I guess, how aggressive he went.
For sure. I think we mentioned last week how it had been surprisingly, there'd been a very few leaks coming out of the administration. It was very tight-lipped about. So it sort of was a tricky one in terms of the market. It was tough to gauge the consensus sort of expectations about, the level of the tariffs and the applicability of them and whatnot. But certainly, I suppose the market told us that, hey, it was a lot worse than people anticipated or a lot more aggressive. Just to give us some context of where, crypto markets are at, I suppose, in terms of the weekly time frame. We've had a slight bounce, in the past 24 hours or so, which we'll get into in just a bit. But over 7 days, got ETH down 4%, ETH down about 15%, Bitcoin down 4%, XRP down around 10%, and Solana down 12 to 13%. So Bitcoin dominance still it just keeps pushing through to around I believe it's around 4-year highs. So again, for anyone new, just what is the market cap of Bitcoin as a percentage of the global crypto market cap? And I think it is up to around 64% at the time of recording, which makes sense given what we'll get into soon. But I think just your initial take, Simon, of before, as we get into the Trump tariffs and what was announced, maybe just break down, I suppose, your reaction of what actually unfolded.
Well, you've got up there the picture of Trump showing off his big board of reciprocal tariffs. I think that's going to be a meme that will go down in the ages, that picture.
Absolutely.
We'll see plenty of people copying that. Yeah. I think my biggest reaction was simply that nobody expected him to go so hard, even though he's been telling us, in hindsight, you look back and he's been telling us that he's been going to go hard on tariffs. He's been telling he wants it reciprocal. He's been telling us that he wants to reduce the trade deficit and all these things. And no one actually believed him. But so, I got to give the hats off to the guy. He's actually just gone out and done exactly what he said he was going to do. And I know a lot of people might think he's, destroying the economy and things like that. But I guess I like to have some rose-colored glasses on. I just assume that he's a really smart guy and he really knows what he's doing, which is, he's trying to bring back manufacturing to the US. He's trying to obviously reduce the trade deficit. He's trying to reduce government debt. So he's doing something different, which other governments haven't had either the initiative or maybe the guts to do it. So he's got a plan and he's acting it out. And so I just got to take hats off to someone who's actually taking action on what they said they're going to do.
Yeah, for sure. For better or worse, it's actually I suppose refreshing in a way to see someone actually follow through on something they've long believed in and spoken about. And we'll see what unfolds in the coming weeks and months, which we'll get into soon. But for anyone living under a rock or anyone who doesn't really consume news or anything, you would have seen maybe markets have tanked and many other reactions. People are talking about prices potentially going up on a lot of items, and that's all just because of the announcement that came on April 2nd. So essentially just imports to from the US consumers. So the costs of them importing all of different goods and around the world is rising astronomically. Basically as of now, start of April. Particularly things manufactured in Vietnam, Thailand, even China, of course. They will become a lot more expensive, and ultimately US consumers are very likely to be the hardest hit of any party in the world. But absolutely the global economy, if this whole keeps going, the global economy is like a big loser here in sort of the short term, even though it's particularly particularly impactful for US consumers. Definitely there's flow-on effects, secondary effects, even third-order effects that really are negative for the most part for the growth outlook for really all of the world, including us down here in Australia. So that's why markets like freaked out and really sold off quite heavily, particularly the risky assets like cryptocurrency and even like tech stocks and things like that. So that just sort of brings you up to speed for anyone who was actually wondering why we sold off by so much. But yeah, I suppose the big question now, Simon, is yes, markets have sold off like astronomically. I think even the Nasdaq, Dow Jones, S&P 500, lost about 8 to 10% within about 2 trading sessions. It was looking like a very terrible opening on Monday in US time. And it was for a bit, but then we saw a dramatic change in messaging, and the sort of bleeding was stemmed for a bit there. I suppose like the big question now is like what happens next?
Yeah, well, it did bounce, but like it's given away most of that bounce now. So it'll be interesting to see if we just roll over further. And I think it's really going to come down to what comes out of Trump's mouth next, really, because there's obviously a lot of talk, especially from the Secretary Treasury Scott Bessent over there. He's talking about at least about 70 countries have approached the US to renegotiate tariffs and the trade balance. So they're coming back to them saying, "Hey, okay, let's talk." And as we've kind of said previously, this is Trump's negotiating tactic. He goes in very hard, very heavy, and tries to get the best outcome. So it'll be very interesting to see if they either do start renegotiating, do start bringing it back a little bit, making these tariffs not as bad. Maybe they do get deals where they start having a bit more tariff-free environment. We don't really know, but I think that's what the US wanted. They wanted to have this position of power to be able to dictate their terms, and they're getting that because I guess at the end of the day, people want to trade with the largest economy in the world, and that's what we're seeing.
Yeah, that's it. So just monitoring Trump's language and whatnot, and also the ability for other countries or whether other countries come to the table. I think initially we saw Trump basically saying there'll be no negotiating. A few days later, looks like they're now, as you said, the treasurer. There will be negotiations going. I think Japan is among the first ones there. The real sticking point and potentially, why that correction is sort of retraced back down a bit could be because of China's reaction to. China did react to the US and sort of came back with, I think, 34% tariffs by themselves late last week. Then the US has sort of come back. I think this was even overnight that there's going to be another 50% tariffs, and China has just come out, I think, in the last hour or so, and again just has been talking very, very tough and very stubborn. So yeah, this is why, given they're the two largest economies on the planet, it would just be a very bad scenario for risk assets in particular if these two countries really struggle in their negotiations.
Yeah, these are the ones to watch, really. No one cares about so many others. Like, if Australia come back and say, "Oh, we want to do something about this tariff," no one in the world actually cares. And the trade between the two countries is actually so small, it'd be a drop in the ocean. So it really comes down to China and the US and what they do. So I think that's really the one to watch. Okay, the EU might have some big news. India might have some big things because they've got reasonable economies. But I think watching what happens between Trump and China, that's the main thing here of whether we have a faster rebound out of this, whether they can get to a resolution sooner rather than later, or whether they fight it out for a week. And my kind of gut feeling is that both these guys are strong leaders and they don't want to look weak in front of the other, and so they're going to have a bit of showmanship, and it's going to be a bit of back and forth for a little while. So I don't think it's going to resolve this week.
Yeah, I agree. That last point in particular, the two leaders are very strong in their styles. So yeah, that's going to be like arguably it's always an 80-20 approach, really. Just this, if you're going to just watch one relationship, it's definitely the China and the US. So in terms of timeframes, that's another thing. So a lot of people waiting to maybe buy discounted cryptocurrencies or even stocks in some cases. the big question I've been getting is, yeah, how long is this going to last? Obviously, as Simon said earlier, it will depend a lot on negotiations and just the language from the administration. I I tend to believe it'll be a matter of, I can't see it all just being wound up in April. I would be more likely to think it would be in May. I think, though, the key point is the indication in the language. So and how much the market sort of prices in things getting better. And that's incredibly hard to predict, but I would just, encourage anyone trying to look at timing and, the big read on how things are going to play out. I think absolutely just doubling down on monitoring the language and statements from Trump and Bessent. They're pretty straightforward, as we've always said on this podcast. They often do just follow through with exactly what they say, which is refreshing. So I would just double down on monitoring their language, because the market will definitely react quite strongly based on whatever they say.
Yeah, and I think the main thing for people to think of, because people are like, okay, what's going to happen to the price? And, obviously we don't know for sure, but I just cannot see how there's going to be some positive news out of this in the short term. Like, it's not going to be all of a sudden, okay, everything's rosy and prices will start going back up again. So for me, I think that there's still uncertainty and this will go back and forth for a bit. And so to me, that means prices sideways or down. I can't see a scenario at the moment in this short-term period where these two countries just get on board and get on with it. And even if they do, there's still going to be some element of tariffs in place which are going to impact the market. And so that's still going to have some spookiness in the market until that new level of trade and that new level of tariffs and tax against each other levels out. People get used to that.
Yeah, for sure. I think, and just before we probably move on, one last thing to highlight for anyone wanting to read a bit more on the power dynamics in Trump's team. I think, as Simon touched on, Scott Bessent there has been sort of a lot more vocal in his media, and even saying, as Simon said earlier, around 70 countries or so have sort of come with offers to wanting to negotiate, and Bessent is also representing Trump and meeting with Japan with another cabinet member in the coming days. So I might link to this in the show notes, but this was an interesting report here, and this article was an interesting read, just to just an impact of someone who's got a deep career in markets. He's from traditional finance, and that's where he made his name, sort of influencing Trump's messaging. And these reports are consistent with what we have seen play out in the past 24, 48 hours. And I think it's pretty wide. The wide view here is that this was the big reason why markets sort of weren't just completely nuking again on Monday, which is what it was looking like happening 24 hours earlier. So we won't really go into it, but an interesting read there for anyone wanting to dig a bit deeper. Tariffs will keep being a part of the discussion, as we've been saying for weeks now. But otherwise, the outlook for crypto is again just the same story of Bitcoin having some strong catalysts relative to altcoins. One big reason that we've been going on about is being the new buyer in this bull market of sort of corporates, particularly MicroStrategy. But we've also now seen a new player join in terms of GameStop. We covered this recently. Just a bit of an update there is that they actually did succeed in raising 1.5 billion, which was at the upper limit, I believe, of their intention. And so they've raised 1.5 billion for the purpose of buying Bitcoin. So interestingly, just putting it in context, that would make them the fourth largest, corporate holder of like a publicly traded company. That would put them straight up to fourth place. Obviously a big gap between MicroStrategy and second place, but again, that's a big reason why Bitcoin dominance is at multi-year highs, as well as just the, I guess, risk-off nature of the market at the moment. But yeah, that's just another story of this bull market that continues to surface.
And I think of interest with GameStop is that when they announced that they were going to raise this money to buy Bitcoin, they had a fair dump on their stock price, but it's actually rebounded quite strongly. So considering that it's rebounded quite strongly while the rest of the market's dumped is a telling sign that, hey, actually people do see MicroStrategy style play going on here. It could be actually create value for their stock as well.
Yeah, that's it. Also, similar to a Bitcoin-centric news item, we got this one here. Speaking of the Trumps, they continue to sort of get involved. This project now rebranding and being called American Bitcoin. The Trump family, or particularly the two brothers, Eric Trump and Donald Trump Jr., are sort of involved in this project. I think more specifically, that's through an investing sort of, connection. But Eric Trump is also taking, is sort of joining the American Bitcoin's like initial founding team, serving as a chief strategy officer there. So, or chief strategy officer, yeah. So that is connected to a number of, it's consistent with a number of stories we've seen come out in the past 6 months or so of the Trump family continuing to, I guess, get involved in the crypto industry for better or worse. I saw yesterday, actually, Simon, I think Donald Trump Jr.'s tweet about recommending everyone to get into ETH. It's down about 48% since he basically gave out a big recommendation there. So not a great start, but look, it's good that they're continuing at least, I think, to get involved. And yeah.
Another famous tweet that I think will get shared a lot until ETH actually reclaims that price.
Yeah, for sure. Alrighty, so that's essentially it in terms of news. A bit quiet on the altcoin front once again. This is another US-centric news story. So at the end of the day, it is influential for markets. This one is connected to, I suppose, just Solana having some more presence and bolstering their stocks there in terms of their representation in Washington, D.C. So we had, what's her name, Kristen Smith here. She's been at Blockchain Association, which has been around, I want to say since about 2018 or 19. And they have done a lot of work in terms of trying to represent crypto in Washington. So to have someone like her come across and basically take the role of president at the Solana Policy Institute is certainly something that I think just is worth a shout out. I think it just ensures that Solana is considered and, I suppose, represented in any sort of policy making that involves, the future of crypto. So that can only be positive news for Solana. So otherwise, it was a pretty quiet week in terms of altcoins.
And I think in general, we're going to see altcoins continue to be quiet because any of the smaller projects don't want to announce good news right now because it's not going to really impact the price because no one's ready or willing to go out in that risk curve. So any significant changes that are going on for most projects, they're going to either hold them back or they're not going to, really promote and announce these changes that are going on because they're going to wait to fairer weather because fairer weather is going to bring more attention, and that's what it's all about. It's all about network adoption, getting eyeballs on the product. So I think we're going to continue to see altcoins really not want to do much in this environment. The developers will be building, they'll be putting stuff in place for sure. That's still got to go on. But, it'll be soft launches rather than really loud announcement launches about these things going on for the time being until Bitcoin and the stock markets really want to give a bit of a turnaround.
Yeah, very good point there. In terms of, wrapping things up here, Simon, we've got underrated or overrated. What have you got for us this week?
Yeah, well, I think in this period of time where we've had so much fear in the market and altcoins just in general being completely obliterated, there's the underrated element of just really holding a large percentage of portfolio in Bitcoin. I myself have been probably not holding enough Bitcoin during this period of time, and I think that's really underappreciated, just holding some of the top coins and doing nothing. Because at the end of the day, this is a heavily manipulated price action from these tariffs. It doesn't fundamentally change so much about crypto, and so if you're thinking of that long-term investment horizon, if you've got some of the really top solid projects, then sticking your head in the sand and just ignoring this, it's not necessarily short-term. I do feel this is going to be more of a medium-term kind of noise and impact on the market, but you probably would be sleeping much better if you weren't out in the risk curve too much, I would say.
Yeah, great point there. I've got underrated. Well, a lot of things were underrated. Yeah, no one really saw them this week just because of the tariff news. Back to Simon's point earlier, if you're an altcoin project, it's probably not worth announcing much because it'll just get drowned out. But one thing I did pick up was that some former, Kraken executives, so the exchange there in the US, they have essentially acquired like a majority ownership in a sort of Nasdaq listed company there, and they're looking to essentially transform it into something like a micro strategy, but for all other altcoins. They're going to start with Solana, and I think they'll stay with that strategy for a while before potentially expanding into other areas, or into other cryptocurrencies. So not only will that involve sort of acquiring Solana, but also sort of running validators as well, and revenue earned from staking will be reinvested to increase their Solana reserves. So this is the first time this has happened for a US listed company. There is a smaller sort of initiative, I think Sol Strategies in Canada.
Yeah.
But yeah, just with the pedigree of people involved, I thought it was just worth a shout out. They also, I guess to sort of reinforce that, they also raised slightly over $40 million from some really like big heavy hitters in the industry, such as Pantera, Arrington Capital as well. So between Kraken executives being involved plus the ties to their investors, I think this one has more of a chance of, I guess, making a splash compared to Sol Strategies. But yeah, we'll see how that goes. I think it is now called DeFi Dev Corp or something like that. So yeah, might link to that as well in the show notes.
It's quite possibly worthwhile looking into those Sol Strategy people because they have been buying at some of the highs of Solana. So they are probably not feeling so great right about now. So
good point.
when you are going on a massive aggressive buying strategy like this, it's probably now is a better time than when it was a bit more euphoric 6 months ago.
Yeah, great point there to wrap things up. So yeah, was a huge week. I'm sure, it'll be a very eventful month ahead. Not sure for crypto just yet, but we'll be helping you make sense of it all. And certainly subscribe to our newsletter as well, where we'll continue to keep you up to date on everything going on in the crypto market as well. So subscribe to that at collectiveshift.io/newsletter. That's collectiveshift.io/newsletter.